Welcome back again. In this final video in our SOS playlist, we consider how professional mould remediators should be guided in their work. So if you, your insurer or your landlord are employing a professional remediator to clean up your mould, it is very important that they have knowledge of the fact that mould, or more correctly fungi, is a control of substances hazardous to health regulations issue, and that they are familiar with either the BS PAS 64 or ANSI IICRC S520 standard, and preferably both. The BS PAS 64 is published by the British Standards Institute and is the code of practice for the mitigation and recovery of water damaged buildings. It is the nearest we have in the UK to a standard for mould remediation, as it covers how to return water damaged buildings to a normal condition, including addressing the levels of biological contamination. There is also the ANSI IICRC S520 standard for professional mould remediation. ANSI is the American National Standards Institute and the US equivalent of BSI. Now, it could be argued that we do not have to follow the S520 in the UK because it's American. Well, this would represent a very poor understanding of the content and purpose of the standard. Firstly, in our humble opinion, the USA is ahead of us on the subject of mould remediation, almost certainly because they are a more litigious society than we are. So insurance companies, building facilities managers and professional restorers are much keener to follow approved practices in the USA. Secondly, the S520 standard describes the highest standard of care. Ask yourself these two questions. Just because you do not live in the USA, should you be happy with anything less than the highest standard of care from a contractor when it comes to your health or the health of your loved ones? Is your family's health less likely to be affected by mould in the UK than that of a family living in the USA? Thirdly, if a mould remediation specialist follows the S520 standard, that remediator will be complying with UK health and safety law and control of substances hazardous to health regulations as they pertain to a biological hazard, as well as to the British Standards Institute publication BS PAS 64. The S520 is much more detailed than the PAS 64, but there is no significant practical difference between the two. As a UK-based business, we would expect mould remediation work to be carried out to the highest standard of care, and there are contractors operating in the UK who have been trained to that standard. To set about solving a mould problem, we need to know what our goals are. The S520 describes 3 mould conditions. Condition 3 describes an indoor environment contaminated with the presence of actual mould growth, associated spores and fungal fragments. The growth can be active or dormant, visible or hidden. Condition 1 describes an indoor environment that may have settled spores, fungal fragments or traces of actual growth, whose identity, location and quantity are reflective of a normal fungal ecology for a similar indoor environment. Now, I left condition 2 until last because condition 2 is very interesting. Condition 2 describes an indoor environment which is primarily contaminated with settled spores or fungal fragments that were dispersed directly or indirectly from a condition 3 area and which may have traces of actual growth. To recap and summarise, condition 3, actual mould growth, active or dormant, visible or hidden. Condition 2, contaminated with settled spores or fungal fragments from a condition 3 area. Condition 1, settled spores, fungal fragments or traces of actual growth reflective of a normal fungal ecology. So let's expand on condition 2 for a moment. Condition 2 represents an indoor environment in which mould is not seen as a problem to the casual observer because that's not where the mould appears to be growing. However, contamination levels will be higher simply because that environment is in proximity to one in which it is growing. Remember how mould and fungal fragments spread on the air? The longer the mould growth is permitted to exist, the more widespread and elevated the condition 2 will become. The solution for some people will be to deal with the environment that is in condition 3, because they can either see the mould or they can smell it. Correct mould remediation is about returning an affected indoor environment to condition 1, regardless of whether it was in condition 3 or 2. This is supported by both the S520 and PAS 64, although using different form of words. This standard of work would typically only be achieved by trained personnel, and the results of their work should be measured at the end of a project to confirm that an acceptable approximation to condition 1 has actually been achieved. Once again, this is supported by both the S520 and PAS 64. For those suffering from poor health, which may be connected to mould, even returning an indoor environment to condition 1 may not be enough unless they are also receiving medical treatment for the damage that has already been done to their bodies. For sufferers of CFS, ME or SIRS and other related ailments, remediation may have to go to a level which is even cleaner than the normal ecological levels expected for a similar property. Let's call it condition 0. Now that does not mean zero contamination, it just means lower than normal. Condition 0 is not in the standard, it's just a shorthand we use in the Restoration Academy to describe a more ambitious goal than condition 1 as defined by the standard. However, if a condition 0 were to be achieved, it would almost certainly be temporary, as the environment will reach equilibrium with its surroundings eventually, but it may give someone the breathing space, no pun intended, to heal while they are still receiving treatment. Conditions 1, 2 and 3 can be applied to describe contents as well as building materials. Contents remediation requires a great deal of thought. Returning contaminated contents into a clean room elevates the room back to condition 2 and would be regarded as a setback. A professional service should have a plan for dealing with contaminated contents. Remember that mould will return unless the underlying moisture problem is solved, whoever does the work. Look out for our next series of videos on mould remediation. Thank you for watching.